afternoon. Sorry about that. I'm a little late today. A little late to the game. Sorry, let me do that. Let's get that over there like that. There we go. There we go. Yeah, a little late to the game today. You know, it happens. It happens. I had to do some stuff, and so then I ended up having this stuff. Anyway, it's all good. Hello. And let me see if I can get a little better. No, because if I do that, then I won't get comments. Let's do that. Okay. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Oh gosh, I forgot to pull up. Give me a second here. I got a thing. All right. So, yes. Let me just find this thing that I have. Where's the thing that I have? I have a thing. My name is, Dr. Shannon Coates, and I am up in a place called Ontario, north of Toronto, and you'll notice that I am from Southern Ontario-ish, by the way that I say Toronto. You'll notice that folks who are not from this area say Toronto, and then you're like, oh look, you're not from Toronto, are you? Toronto. Anywho, right, so I am grateful to live and work on the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Mississauga and Wendat Neo-NCO peoples, and something to consider if you are looking to have some further education and things to consider when you are considering the lands that you are on and the original caretakers and current caretakers of the land that you are on. Something to consider, especially if you're in Canada and especially if you are in North America. Something to consider is a new podcast that has just come out, 8-part podcast. I haven't listened to it fully yet. And it's called Cooper Island from CBC Podcasts, and it is about residential schools, and an 8-part series that tells the stories of 4 students, 3 who survived and 1 who did not. So that is something to consider if you are looking to understand the history and also the current ways of the Indigenous people, especially here in North America, in Canada, excuse me. So I'll put the links to that. If you're a podcast listener, that's something to consider. I'll put the links to that in the show notes. I'm a podcast listener, clearly. I'll put the links to that in comments, etc., and I will link to it and tag that for your interest. Hey, today I've been trying to sift through how and what I want to talk about and address around this idea of didactic, prescriptive, top-down, pointing out the vocal faults teaching. And there's a lot to unpack, deconstruct. There's a lot in this subject, and so I've just been kind of trying to figure out what I want to actually talk about or what I actually want to address. And I think I might wait and address or talk a little bit about some of the maybe I won't. Maybe I'll say just a little bit today about this first, and then I'm going to talk a little bit specifically about the practicality around the language that we use to communicate, and around do's and don'ts, and around calling out vocal faults, as well as having a framework, a diagnostic framework. But I'm going to say just this little part first. So I called out the title of James McKinney's very popular and widely read, influential text in my post, in a post earlier this week. And lots of folks on Facebook had some feelings about the way that I called that title out, and possibly rightly so. And interestingly enough, on Instagram, no one had any thoughts about that title. It's very interesting. Just different, different populations and things hit people in different ways, of course. And so, whoops, I got out the wrong book. That's the where. Here we go. They both have nice gold covers. I have these editions that have nice gold collars. Clifton Ware and James McKinney. So the McKinney is the book that I called out. This is the Diagnosis and Correction of Vocal Faults. So a manual for teachers of singing and the choir directors. And this is just, obviously the title is, or maybe not obviously, I find the title to be emblematic, if you will, of a kind of particular philosophical approach around teaching and around this approach where, and this is super simplified, there's a whole history of understanding didactic educational philosophy and understanding holistic, and also what we consider to be a more holistic or student-led approach changes through the centuries, right? So and culturally it changes as culture changes. So some of the things that we consider to be a didactic, a top-down, a point out the vocal faults kind of approach to teaching in our current climate, in our current culture, was considered quite liberal and quite not didactic in, as much as 50 years ago, or maybe even less. So our understanding of what these terms mean and what they are and how they look in practical application changes as our cultural understanding changes, of course. So that's something to keep in mind. And of course, part of the reason that I called this text out, is because of the big ol', the kind of, like I said, it's sort of emblematic of this philosophy around teaching where I, as the teacher, have all of the answers, and I, as the teacher, are going to point out to you all of the things that are wrong. And so I am going to, for you, because it's in your best interests to know what's wrong. And I want to just say, there is nothing wrong with having a diagnostic approach to teaching. In fact, I think most of us try to have a diagnostic approach to teaching where we are looking and we're listening and observing what is happening in the singer that we're working with, right? What is happening in that singer? And we're synthesizing information about what we're seeing, what we're hearing, what we're feeling, what we're sensing. We're synthesizing all of that information, and we're kind of putting it, we're adding it to our body of knowledge, or we are looking into our body of knowledge, all of the information that we already have, as well as our body of experience and all of our tools. And we're working to see how can we work with this singer to find those tonal outcomes and those most efficient coordinations, of course. So that is, I have nothing against having a framework, a diagnostic framework, which is something that folks like James McKinney certainly did contribute to voice pedagogy. So they contributed a kind of here are the things that you should be looking for, and here are some of the, if this is what you hear, then this may be what's happening. So they contributed Miller, all of the sort of, I'm talking sort of mid-century, Vennard, all of these guys, Dosher, folks all through this, especially mid-century, contributed, and 80s, 70s, 80s, move it up through, contributed a framework for diagnosis, for a framework for diagnosing, right? Diagnosing, so that teachers would have a more systematic way to approach what am I hearing, what am I observing, what am I feeling, what am I sensing, what's happening in that singer's body. And that is not a bad thing. That's fantastic. We love to. This is a very good thing and a very good, a wonderful contribution to voice pedagogy and to us being able to teach better. I think teach more efficiently. So the people are here to do my lawn. It's amazing. Anyway, so that's not a bad thing. Where the issue sneaks in is when we are not examining the way that we are treating this information and our philosophy behind the information that we're getting and the reason that we're diagnosing, right? So where things can get off the rail and where things can be, where students have had damage and had damage and sustained harm, and to this day do continue to, is when voice teachers have a philosophy behind their teaching that says, I am doing right by you, I am doing the right thing by pointing out to you the vocal fault and by framing this thing that is happening in your singing as a fault or a deficit, so that we are going to change or correct or fix your fault or your deficit. So that's where things go off the rails, right? That's where we start to get issues. That's where we start to have students and singers who come out of studios and who come out of an educational experience with harm, where they feel that they, that things are wrong with them and that they have things that need to be fixed or corrected, right? There's a fault or a deficit that needs to be corrected. And that can be something that we say explicitly in the lesson, and I hope that folks are not saying that explicitly anymore, although there are still very recently, just a couple of years back, someone on a forum was talking about the fact that they were devastated because they went to see a high-level coach who said to them, your technique is all wrong and we have to take it apart in order to build it up again. So that is an example of the kind of devastation and the kind of teaching, sorry about that noise, hopefully it's not too crazy, where a singer takes on, that's an explicit, that's someone saying explicitly, your technique is wrong and you are doing it wrong, and all of this time and all of the things that you have put in and all of this money that you have spent training is useless. It's a good thing you came to me because I am going to help you to rebuild it. I'm going to fix it, right? I'm going to correct it. Now, that is still present today in our teaching, and of course I say it's old school, but there are also lots of old school teachers who were not necessarily teaching in this way either. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. The timing, of course, the timing. the background noise. Oh, I'm sorry. So that it can be as explicit as that, right? And it can also be completely implicit. It can be something that is not said explicitly, like your technique is wrong or you're doing that wrong. It can be as implicit as you're singing flat. Don't sing that way. Don't do the thing. That is also that is also a communication that can come from I have diagnosed that there is something wrong with your singing, and here's the thing that you're doing, don't do it. And there are a couple of issues with this. One is simply from a learning standpoint, from an actual knowledge and motor learning acquisition standpoint, where when we tell folks not to do a thing, we actually end up, the folks who are being told not to do a thing, actually it has to go through a couple of permeations in the brain in order for us to actually do a thing. We need something to do in order to not do the thing. And as soon as you say, and parenting manuals will tell you this too, as soon as you say to a child, don't touch the stove, what do? They touch the stove. Why do they touch the stove? Because the brain goes, I have to not do a thing. Wait, what is the thing that I'm not doing though? Like, give me the thing to do, right? So they go like, okay, oh no, don't touch the stove. But what is the thing that I have to do to not touch the stove? And also, why shouldn't I touch the stove? I want to try touching the stove, right? So this is the same in teaching. As soon as we say, don't close your mouth. Okay, I won't close my mouth. I won't close my mouth. What am I doing? I'm reinforcing closing my mouth because I don't close my mouth. All I'm thinking about is not closing my mouth, right? So what am I doing? I'm going to close my mouth even more, probably. And so what happens is I don't have something to do. So from a pedagogical standpoint, like just from a learning standpoint, it's not a great way to communicate a thing. We want to go for the do. From a from a sort of more psychological, I don't know if that's the right word, but from a pedagogical standpoint, as soon as I'm telling people to don't do a thing, that's right, don't do a thing, or I'm telling them the thing that is wrong with what they're doing, so I'm saying, you're closing your mouth too much, your jaw is too tight, your tongue is tense, your breathing is too shallow, you're singing flat, you're singing sharp, the vibrato is too wide, the blah, blah, blah. So as soon as I am saying the thing that is wrong, the thing that is not working, that becomes a thing that not only can I not get my brain off it now because I don't have something to do, but also it becomes the thing that I take into my identity as a singer. Right? I take that in. And now I'm the person who has to work on not singing sharp. Now I'm the singer who always sings sharp, and now I've got to work on not singing sharp. Or now I'm the singer who has a nasally voice. I cannot tell you how many singers I have worked with who somewhere along the line, someone told them that their singing was too nasally, and now they feel like they are the nasal singer, and that's the only thing they can focus on in their singing is, how do I get rid of my nasal singing? So it becomes part of your identity as a singer, becomes part of who you are because someone has told you that you are too nasal when you sing, or you are, you're out of tune, or blah, blah, blah. Let me see, someone is saying here, my former teacher always said I did something wrong when I liked the sound I was making. It negatively affected the way I sang for a while, which is why I don't use wrong with my students. Yeah, so that is also really challenging. Yay, Brianne! Also really challenging when you're the student or the singer, and you sing something, and there are aspects of that sound that you really like, or maybe it feels great, and so you're like, that's amazing, and then your teacher, the person who is supposed to be with you on this journey, rather than saying, how did that feel? What did you think? What was great about that sound, says, oh, you didn't breathe right. Or you didn't, your knees were locked. So there's that so it's almost a form of gaslighting, right? It's almost a form of gaslighting because you and your body are like, but I liked that a lot. And then the person who is supposed to be with you on this journey is telling you that it wasn't actually as good as you thought. Or it wasn't, right? So there are issues, pedagogical issues, of course, and I tend to think that this kind of, when we use the don'ts or we use the wrongs or we point out the thing that isn't working, I tend to think that is, born of what we had done to us or the way that we were taught, right? The way that we were in studios, and how that, how that, and also possibly our personality or the way we were raised. I mean, there's lots that goes into it. And of course, because so many of us were voice teachers, especially, we come into this industry without doing any kind of educational work, right? We don't learn how to teach. We don't have practicums. We don't have we don't go teach in a mentored environment. We don't, and these things aren't necessarily pointed out to us at any point. Our attention has not been drawn to the fact that, we learn in this kind of way. And remember when someone said that to you, and you're like, oh yeah, that's right. That is a thing. Huh. How, and we don't always know how to change it, right? So we've got this kind of I don't know, well, that's the way that I was taught, and so now here's the way that I'm going to teach, kind of thing. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that we sometimes are communicating in a way in the voice studio in a way that is not actually lining up with our values, right? So we internally think we have values that say, I want to honor this singer. I want to do right by this singer. I want to, foster agency in this singer. I want to support their creativity and the way that they want to communicate. And that's our values, and we know that those are our values. And sometimes the stuff that comes out of our face doesn't actually align with our values. Because often too, I mean, I'm sure, Jenna, I'm sure that your teacher, when they were saying that something was wrong with what you were doing, I'm sure they meant it with the best of intentions, right? They're saying, okay, I'm going to do right by this singer by pointing out to them that the sound might have been good, but they still didn't take a good enough breath. Or, yeah, the sound was good, but their tongue was still in not a good place. Or they didn't do they didn't do those 3 things that we talked about, or whatever, right? So those teachers, as you likely know about me, I think the majority of us are doing our best and are good people and are trying our best, the majority of us. And so voice teachers, same. I think we are doing what we think is right and doing what we think we should be doing to do right by our students. So that's part of the reason I think that we need to, I want to make sure we're examining that, right? And that's part of the reason I bring up the diagnosis and correction of vocal faults as well. And something that I said a couple of times in some of the comments as well is the contribution of our, the folks who went before us, like James McKinney, the contribution is not in question. And whether or not James McKinney was a great person who loved teaching and who was possibly an effective voice teacher, I don't know whether he was or not, but possibly was an effective voice teacher, that's not in question. What's in question here is, what are the implied things that we have taken on? What are those things that we have taken on and we aren't questioning, which granted are from another cultural time, from another era, likely. And so then what are those things and how can we change them? So let's do I want to do two practical, I'm so sorry about the noise. Hopefully it's not too crazy. Anyway, what are 2 practical things that we can do in the voice studio to move out of a more prescriptive, pointing out what's wrong, giving the don't rather than the do, things that we can do in the voice studio? How can we move into a less prescriptive, a more, oh good, I'm glad, thanks Brianne, it's not distracting, good. How can we move into a more student-led, student-supporting, student-affirming kind of space in the voice studio? And what are some of the things we can do so that the way we're communicating aligns with our values, which our values, I think our values are that we want to support singers, and we want to we want to help singers to have agency in the voice studio, right? And yeah. So One thing is to, as I said on a reel a little bit ago, is to, whenever the word don't wants to sneak into the vocabulary, give yourself just that hot second and say, what is it that I do want? What is it that I do want? And this is also true for if you're adjudicating, if you are, if you're doing written adjudications, spoken adjudications. What do I do want? Rather than pointing out the thing that is not working, or rather than telling the student to not do a thing, what is the thing that I do want? What's the thing that should be happening? So lots of examples of that are, for example, if you're adjudicating and a student isn't, perhaps they're not singing in tune. And perhaps the singer in front of you is not singing in tune. You can say, hey, that was flat. Depending on the student, of course, you can say that. Or you can say, what are some, how can we find more energy, specifically in these three areas, or specifically on this pitch and on this vowel? How can we figure out a way to have more energy? What does that do? When I say what I want, first of all, it makes me do some good diagnostic work, right? And prescription work in the positive sense, where I'm thinking, okay, this is the thing I'm hearing. What is something that might help to find better coordination there? So I'm not thinking it's right or wrong. I'm just saying, okay, that's miscoordinated for whatever reason. What's something I can help? What's something that will help to find better coordination there or more efficiency there? What is something that will help? That's the thing I'm going to ask for. I'm going to ask for the thing that might help to find more coordination there. So that gives me the chance to be a better diagnostician, right? That makes me work a little bit better and get more clear in my own head about what I'm hearing, and then what is going to be useful to find that more efficient coordination. So that helps me a lot as a teacher. Helps me a lot. Every time I say, oh, you're singing flat, so don't sing flat, that doesn't make me think about what are the actual solutions, right? Anybody can hear that they're singing flat. You're the voice teacher for a reason. You need to have some options to help to help figure that out, right? So they probably don't need you to tell them that they are singing flat. They probably can just hear that from a recording. And so you need to have some options to help that. So that's the first thing, is it helps you to be a better diagnostician. It helps you as the teacher to be more clear in your mind about what is happening anatomically, physiologically, and how we can find some ways, some options to find more efficient coordination. Secondly, when I change from the don't to the do, and when I change from the don't to the do in an option-oriented way, I take the negativity, I take the moral failing out of the equation. When I say you're singing flat, you're closing your mouth too much, that was too nasally, that was too open, that was too dark, see how that's like a moral, almost moral, meaning like you did something wrong. Not necessarily saying that you're saying that, but that can be the implication. So loud. That can be the implication. So when I say, rather that, oh yes, Christine, and it is a closed statement. Exactly. It's a closed statement. I hadn't even put that in my head yet, but yes. And we also treat singing flat as the worst thing in the world, and it's really not. Totally true. It's really not. It happens. Life goes on. And also, singing flat doesn't necessarily mean that there's anything going on with your brain, right? Like, it's not like you're a bad singer if you sing flat. We just got to figure out the coordination for it. But that's what I mean. It means that when I say, how can we get more energy in this specific spot? What happens if while you're singing you do a little plie on that spot? What happens if through this like phrase you give yourself a little hand motion? What happens if through that phrase you sing it all on an E vowel? What happens if you do that phrase with a tongue trill first and then we'll, like all of these options to give more energy? What does that do? It takes the sting out. It takes that moral failure out. It takes the bad out. It gives you, oh, hey, hello, oh my gosh. Hey, Christine from Australia, where it's 2:42 a.m. Woohoo! And you just finished the gig. I love it. I love it. What else are you going to do after a great gig, right? You're going to come on Facebook and listen to Shannon a little bit. Love it. So yeah, it takes that moral sting out. So then what we have we have a student who, rather than thinking, oh crap, I sang flat, I'm so terrible, I'm so bad. We have a student who says, oh yeah, I could energize more there. Let's see all of my options to energize more there. And then it becomes discovery and options rather than, yeah. And the other thing is, rather than me taking it on as a like a moral failing in my singing, right? And the other thing that does is, again, from a learning standpoint, I am going to give you something to do, because if I tell you not to do a thing, you can't not do a thing. You have to do something. So if I tell you not to sing flat, something has to replace the thing I was doing that was making me sing flat, right? I can't just not sing flat. Something else has to be there. So I'm going to give you some options that are going to be the thing that will replace what was working that wasn't efficient, right? Also, singing flat is a it's a symptom, right? It's a symptom. So we got to figure out what is actually not coordinating as well as it could be in order to get you to singing flat, right? Or whatever it is. So like all of these other whenever I hear myself saying, about to say don't, I'm gonna like, and I'm gonna be like, what do I want? And what are some options that I can offer that we can explore together in order to find the do that is going to replace this don't? The other thing, the second thing is to, whenever you are diagnosing, because you're allowed to think in your head, oh, that was flat. You're 100%. That is part of diagnosing. That is part of being a singing teacher. You're allowed to do that. You're allowed to, that is why we're here. We are that external set of observing with all of this kind of like background information and experience. That is why people are paying us, because we've got these things. So you're allowed to diagnose, and in fact, please do. So what you're going to diagnose then is, when you're observing something and you're thinking, okay, the jaw was still really closed on that, or like the tongue is so far back, or their knees are super locked on that one, let's see. So whenever you're observing the thing that isn't working as well as it could, or that is inefficient or uncoordinated, give yourself that hot second. This is even before you say anything. Give yourself that hot second to, again, in your own mind, phrase it as, but what could it look like? What could happen there? What are the options? What are the possibilities? So even before you say anything, I maybe should have done these in the other order. But anyway, or maybe this is the right order. I don't know. If you feel yourself saying the don't, say the do instead. And even before you say anything, as you're doing the diagnosing, notice yourself doing the diagnosing and saying, okay, that was a little bit, the vibrato was really wide there. What could happen there? And then in your mind, remember that you have many options to address, right? So how can we address this thing? Before you say the thing, which direction am I going to address from? Am I going to address from modeling, where I say, ooh, try it one more time and see if it can sound like this. So I just model right off the top of the bat, right? I can model it right away. I can model while adding a gesture. So say it's flat. All right, can you do this little, I would love to hear this little section one more time with an E vowel like this, and here's what it's gonna look like. It's gonna look like so I'm gonna do it like with, right? And now you do it. So you've got a model option with gestures. You've got model and gesture options. You've got an emotional directive option, which is fantastic, often terrific. You've got that how am I going to go through this like as emotion, character, whatever the word is doing, whatever the text is. You've got an emotional directive option. So say someone is singing a lullaby and they happen to be going flat on the lullaby. What happens if you sing this as if you just won $1 million? Go. So I'm gonna sing the lullaby, but I'm actually gonna like be super excited. Maybe it's like 5 million. I don't know. Is $1 million enough these days to get you excited? I hope so, but I would like $1 million. That'll be okay. But like something that is gonna get you super excited, right? So say you're singing the lullaby, but now we're doing it with this emotional directive. So again, this is what are the options in terms of directive and working toward a better coordination here, or a more efficient coordination. So that one, model with gestures from 50 bucks. Yeah, 50 bucks is enough to get me excited. I hear you. I hear you. I found $10 in my pocket. Yes. So what are the emotional directives I can work on? So if someone's singing too nasally, if you hear that nasal sound maybe creeping in, and maybe it's too far forward, maybe it's too bright, maybe it's too whatever, blah blah blah. Can I hear that exercise again, or try that one more time? And now, what if you are moaning? What if you're Santa Claus? Can I hear it with ho ho ho, the whole thing with ho ho ho, as if you were Santa Claus? Anything like that. What if you are, how would a lion sound singing this song? I don't know, whatever. So you can find that emotional impetus that's going to help to find a different coordination. That's going to get you into a different spot, right? If their knees are locked, what happens if you are, doing a little, I don't know, side shuffle? I don't know, whatever. And then there are tools as well that you can throw in there as well. And then I wonder, I more and more think that the discussion of it is probably the last option. More and more am I thinking that. Where, yes, you can say, okay, so I would love to hear a little bit more energy in that. So with the energy, let's find a little higher tongue, and let's see if you can have, let's find a little fronted higher tongue, and let's see if you can have, a faster breath energy. Like the actual description of it, more and more, I think is maybe the last option. Maybe even not a super great option anyway, because the thinking through of it is not necessarily the way we want to go, right? It's not necessarily great integrated learning. What we want to do is try to find that coordination instinctively, if you will, without too much having to think through the coordination, letting your body kind of find that coordination. And two great ways to do that are by model, demo, with gestures or tools if you want to, as well as talking through affect or emotion driven or characterization or blah, blah, blah. Applying emotion or some kind of other, Santa Claus or Wicked Witch of the West or whatever. So those, when you've done the diagnosis, even if you, so what I'm saying with this, with the like, how are we going to get there? What are my options to get to where I want to go? You don't necessarily have to know that because they're singing, the reason they're singing flat here is because the tongue is too far down, the vocal tract is too open, there's not enough, there's not enough, energy in the breath. Like, you don't actually have to know the specific anatomical, physiological, sciencey stuff that's happening. You don't have to know that, right? Like, that's actually not you can still diagnose without having to diagnose exactly why something is happening. Don't have to, right? And sometimes that's what gets us tripped up sometimes, right? Where we're like, oh, that's flat. I'm not really sure why. But that's okay. You're allowed to be like, oh, I'm not really sure why. That's okay. Because what happens? You're not going to explain it all anyway, right? What are you going to do? You're going to do like, okay, let's explore, do it like I do it, or do it like model and, or do this thing. Let's explore these options rather than pointing out the thing that isn't working well. I like that your approach to correction aligns with the psychology of shaping behavior through creating the desired sound, just so the student produces sound you can praise and yes. So then, yeah. So the student produces sound they can praise and reinforce. Yes. So there's a drawing attention to like, oh yeah. So then, what did that feel like? What changed for you? What did you observe while you were creating that sound now? But I also think, yes, Kay, and I also, what I love about this as well is that we're allowing the body to access and allowing the body to do more of the work for us. And when we allow the body to do this work, when we allow the body to kind of like find the coordination, that takes like 4 or 5 of the learning steps out. Oh my gosh. So Danielle says, I legitimately didn't realize it was okay to not know the exact diagnosis. I've been considering that a failure on my part. Yes. So no, you don't have to know the exact diagnosis. Heck no. Heck no, you do not. who Everyone has to start somewhere. How could every teacher know the exact diagnosis? There's a zero possibility that you are going to know exactly why something is not working or is not coordinating well, right? There's zero possibility you're going to know all of the things, especially with this instrument. I mean, you can't see what's happening, right? So the more experienced we are, the more we hear, the more we listen, the more we work with, we sit in on master classes maybe, or observe other teaching, go to hear adjudications, all that kind of. The more we do, the more experienced we are, the more likely I think we are to have a better understanding of like exactly why something is doing something. And of course, that's why I have anatomy and physiology courses. That's why I do the vocal instrument 101. I think it's great for us to know that information, and I think it only can help confirm things for us. But let me tell you, like when I'm doing the vocal instrument 101, invariably teachers say to me, oh, this is so validating. Like, I didn't know that that's why that was happening, but I knew that this exercise or whatever, this directive always works really well. And now I know why that was such an effective exercise or directive or idea. I didn't realize why the thing was, exactly why what was happening. But now I know why this thing that I stumbled across is actually really useful and helps to find a better coordination around whatever that thing is. Because we can't all know the stuff. And so even as we get more and more anatomy and physiology, we kind of like look at voice science and all that stuff. Yeah, that's going to confirm things for us. And that is likely, we may be, this happens all the time too, right? Like all the time. I see like folks on, Instagram or whatever, and folks talking about getting terrific results and saying like, this is because X, Y, Z. And I'm like, oh, no, actually, no, that's not why, but oh well, who cares, right? Like, who cares? So long as you're not saying to students, oh, this is exactly X, Y, Z, and you're doing X, Y, Z, and because I know the thing, so long as you're saying, I'm pretty sure this is because of blah, 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 might not be. It's like, so long as you're open about it, I don't care whether unless you're actually like, unless you actually say that you're a voice ped, like, person. Unless you're like, I'm a voice ped person, and so I know all the things. And then if you if you're not accurate about stuff, then I get a little pissy about that. But yeah, you don't have to know all the things. And this is the great thing. This is the great thing about being a voice teacher, right? Like the instrument is the voice. The person is the like they're an expert on their body and on their instrument and what it feels like for them. And so if we find ways to work with singers where we are not saying don't, where we are saying do, but the do is not a like, here's the list of the things that you need to do, but the do is, let's explore some options. Then we get to explore together and we figure it out together. Yeah. There's no, I get in trouble when I say these things. I say things like, oh yeah, Christine, what you're saying aligns with Chris Johnson's philosophy. Exactly. We don't always know exactly why something is not coordinating well. We try on different options to see what helps and what doesn't. We're exploring in real time with the student. Exactly. Med SLPs insist on video stroboscopy at frequent intervals. Yes, of course they do. We can't know specifically what is happening in there, right? And so, like, it's, yeah. And I love what Chris Johnson says, too, that every teacher has something to offer every student. Like, there are many ways in. I love that, what he talks about, where there are many ways in to, and in fact, I think if you're a voice teacher who knows the one true way, then you might not be a very effective voice teacher. Yeah. So, and the ears become your ears, your observation, and your experience. Those things become more and more fine-tuned as we go along. Of course they do. But if you're at the beginning of your teaching journey, or if you are in the middle of your teaching journey, wherever you are in your teaching journey, there are going to be things that you don't know, and that's okay. There are going to be lots of diagnostic things that you can't figure out, where all you're hearing is that sounds like there's more effort than there needs to be, or that sounds like I want that to be smoother somehow, right? Okay, so what are we gonna do to make something smoother? Well, again, go through those steps, right? Like that third step of explaining all this stuff, just cross that right off your list. Start with model. Let's model it. Let's see if I can make it smoother. And then what do I have to do to make it smoother? I want to do this. Okay, I made that little scale even smoother. All right, so now we're gonna go through there, blah, 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 blah. And then now you do it, right? Let's start with modeling, or go from affect or characterization or blah, 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 all those things. I know that I don't know everything. Oh yeah, and I don't know everything either, right? Like I know that. I 100% know that. And also, I think this still fits in with what we were talking about, but this is also, where voice teachers get into a little bit of trouble too, when someone comes into the voice studio who has a really rough voice, or who has a voice where it seems like there's a lot of effort, and they may say to you, yeah, there's a lot of effort in my speaking voice. It's been like this my whole life. People can't hear me. I have to or my voice is super growly, and it's been like this my whole life, blah, blah, blah. So when we have folks like that coming into the voice studio, right, we get into trouble where we're like, oh, you have to go see a doctor right now. And yes, they probably should see a doctor right now, but rather than framing it in a there's something wrong with you way, we're going to frame it in a I've heard a lot of voices in my life, and I can tell you that this isn't a typical sound. So we're saying typical rather than normal, right? I can tell you that this isn't a typical sound, and this isn't a typical production, right? There seems to be a lot of effort in this production, and so I can't tell you what's going on because I can't see down there. I would love for you to go and get a scope done and just let's see what's going on in there. Not because there may be a pathology, but you don't have to say that, right? You're gonna frame it in a not what's wrong with you way, but in a let's explore way. So yeah, so the framing. So again, maybe I'll just come back to the beginning again here, wrap it up. So again, nothing against diagnosing. In fact, and diagnosing can be anything from, I would love for that to be, I don't know, smoother. I think so. It can, that can be a diagnosis, right? That could be the diagnosis. It can be anything from that to, ooh, there's a lot of extra subglottal air pressure there, and so we're getting a little bit of, like, it could be anything. It can be anything along the spectrum, right? Nothing, definitely keep diagnosing. And then think about your options, and rather than either pointing out the fault or saying a don't, find the do and find the exploration for the do. How do I explore more, finding more energy? How do we explore having more releases in the, thanks, Kay. How do I explore having more release in the jaw? What are some ways that we could find more release in the jaw rather than, ooh, that jaw's really tight. Okay, so relax the jaw. Relax the jaw, that's not great. Let's figure out some ways. What are some ways we can explore releasing the jaw? What are some ways we can, find a little bit more release there? Yeah. Okay, let's leave it there. Maybe next week we'll talk a little bit about ways to know that you may be reading a prescriptive voice ped text. Couple of things to look out for so that you know that you're reading a prescriptive voice ped text. Some phrases to watch out for. Because that prescriptive, people get mad at me for saying that, like, the diagnosis and correction of vocal faults is prescriptive, overly prescriptive, but there are very, very current voice ped texts that are also super prescriptive as well. And by prescriptive, I mean like, good alignment looks like this, or you can't breathe properly if you don't have good alignment. Well, that's really prescriptive. And also kind of ableist. My screen caption says, find the do. Yes, find the D-E-W rather than find the D-O. I like that. Yes, it's very fresh. Very fresh. Nice image. Find the do. Yeah, maybe I'll change it to like, find the do. And in the say what you want to say, I also say, like, ask for what you want rather than what you don't want, right? Rather than pointing out what you don't want, ask for what you want. And that is a little bit prescriptive, of course, but like, rather than, oh, I'm so glad. Rather than saying, don't do the thing, or you're singing flat, ask for what you actually want and find the options together. Excellent. Have a great weekend. It's a long weekend here in Canada. So happy Victoria Day for any Canadians out there who may be watching. This is like May 24. Oh, thank you, Wesley. Challenging, yeah. I will say there have been folks doing this kind of work for a long time. It's not just me, of course, but yeah. And I think of it more not even as challenging the establishment, but more as, like, let's figure out what's going on with us. Yeah. Happy long weekend from Ontario. Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad. Thanks, Christine. Take good care, friends. Have a great weekend. Happy May 2-4 if you're Canadian. Happy 2-4 Victoria Day. Yeah, we over here in the colonies celebrate Queen Victoria's birthday for some reason. Anyway, yay Queen Victoria. We get a holiday in May, so that works. Okay, take care. Happy weekend.